What's up, everybody? Tim Anderson here, aka the Bearded Dwarven Princess, aka the Angry Bearded White Dude. And today I'm here to rant a little bit more about Rings of Power because I haven't done one for a while. Especially, we're going to be ranting against this article that claims that upsetting purists is a good thing, which I find freaking ridiculous, and I don't think these people know what they're talking about. To a small degree. We're going to dive into it today. If you are a returning visitor, thanks so much for coming back and consuming more of the content. I really appreciate your support. If you are new here, this is the point where I say like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, all those good things. Don't forget to check out Discord. Links are down below. Let's just dive in. So this article is from Looper.com, and it's literally titled "The Lord of the Rings: The Rings of Power is going to upset Tolkien purists, and that's a good thing." And I abso-frackin-lutely disagree. I don't think it's a good thing to upset the core audience of a franchise. It doesn't matter whether you're talking Star Wars, it doesn't matter if you're talking Lord of the Rings, Star Trek, Narnia, Halo, so on and so forth. If you want your films, your TV shows, your books, and etc. to be successful, you need to be conscious of the fan base that you've built and what brought them to that franchise in the first place. In the case of Tolkien, we literally have a nearly 100-year-old franchise, a nearly 100-year-old intellectual property that has been established for so many decades through existing lore and books and reads and rereads and rereads and more rereads and additional rereads and so on and so forth. We have established the core storyline of this world. People know it. And those people, these books have sold hundreds of millions of copies. The Lord of the Rings is the best selling franchise outside of the Bible, if I'm not mistaken. I would love to look at some numbers, but the point is, this thing has sold hundreds of millions of copies, and it sold those hundreds of millions of copies because the fans love what's already there. So the idea that upsetting purists is a good thing, absolutely not true. However, I will say that this article does have some good things to say. We're going to kind of dig through this a little bit and read through at a leisurely pace, mind you, but we're going to be taking issue with some of the things they say and rebutting other things. So let's just dive in. Here's another made up character. Yeah, you can F right off with that. I don't need made up characters in my adaptation, so whatever. Um, the Lord of the Rings of Power is still months away, and we're already struggling with the fact that it's going to be different than the source material. So I've already taken issue with the fact that they're creating new characters. It's not so much that they're creating new characters. The issue I have is the forced genderizing of characters, the forced wokeness that's being injected into this, where we have I've already talked about it in previous videos. We're not going to go to that. The biggest one for me is the gender swapping with the Baron and Luthien tale, and just making characters up to make another elf and human relationship when we already had some beautiful ones from the source material. But I digress. We have another recent cast announcement. Character of Theo, played by Tyro Mohaffedin, um, etc. Whatever. I don't really care so much about that. Um, I just, for me, the issue is it's not so much the invention of characters. Uh, we saw it in The Wheel of Time, horribly done, by the way. I also think it was horribly done in the Hobbit films that Peter Jackson made, which, as much as I loved Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings films, the Hobbit films I like less, especially some of the character stuff they did with Radagast and some other things. But the character of Tariel, I really, it is what it is. I shrug my shoulders now when I watch it, but I don't like the injection of that character and her little, love interest with Feely, and I just feel like that was garbage. I don't like it. I'm on the record saying that. It is what it is. I don't see the need to do those types of things to an adaptation. So, invention of characters that fit the plot and storyline, I am absolutely okay with. Invention of characters just to have some random romance plot, whether or not it's the Toriel situation or creating your own version of Baron Luthien but swapping the genders. I cry bullshit on that every single time because you're not respecting the sanctity of those relationships or the source material in any way, shape, or form. The Perrin's wife situation that they mentioned here from Wheel of Time was one of the major issues didn't that I took with the Wheel of Time show and didn't like it. There was a lot of other reasons that I didn't like that adaptation. And I did give it the benefit of the doubt. I watched it through. Chris has never read the books, so she watched it. She gave it an 8 out of 10. Chris thoroughly enjoyed that show, and I had to cringe my way through it for the sake of my loved one not enjoying any of it. Um, the other thing here is the fact that we're being told that certain characters like Elrond might be gender confused and or gay. And I take offense to that because Elrond is not gender confused or gay. He is married, has kids. His wife, though not no longer in the physical realm, she is nevertheless still alive in the realm beyond. So the idea that Elrond could be gender confused or gay or whatever makes zero sense to me whatsoever. You're just making shit up at this point that has nothing to do with the story. And of course, the defense that people like this, the writer of the story, would like to have is that, well, it was all done with the approval of the Tolkien estate and these Tolkien scholars that the Amazon people worked with, and because of that, it's going to be this amazing show because it's been done with respect to the source material and it's got approval of the Tolkien estate. To a degree, they are largely hands off on stuff like this, where it's like as long as you're painting within these lines and you're not going out and you're not contradicting the lore, then okay. And there's a lot you can do if you're not going to contradict or go outside of those lines. Not necessarily things that I agree with. Now, here's where the article actually says a little bit of good stuff. Adaptations naturally need to adjust the source material. I've said this for a long time. Whether you're adapting a film into a book series, a short story into a TV show, or vice versa, whatever the case may be, it's not necessarily, and they mention it, it's not necessarily just about translating something into another medium. They look at the Oxford Dictionary here to define the adaptation process as the action or process of changing something or of being changed to suit a new purpose or situation. And this is where they talk about when a story is adapted, it isn't just being mirrored into another form of media, it's also being changed and adjusted to fit that medium better. We are on the same page with that, absolutely on the same page. Now, here's where we diverge in our opinions because I absolutely believe in needing to cut things out to make an adaptation fit a medium better. I am not okay with creating things simply for the sake of creating them and adding them to the story. And if you read down further through here, they talk about how creative liberties like the addition of characters are a necessary element that Rings of Power has to tap into in order to make an on-screen version of Tolkien's Second Age story, well, not boring. Bullshit, I cry bullshit. That is absolute bullshit. You do not need to make additional characters when the Second Age is full, chock full of amazing characters and amazing stories that you could have told a story with. Whether or not you're condensing the timeline down or not doesn't matter. You had a library of cool characters that you could have pulled from without the need to make shit up. Um, they talk about here the important thing is to see if the creative liberties are being taken place to improve the story or merely to change it, potentially with other motivations in mind. In other words, are the changes taking place to contradict Tolkien's established source material, or are they enhancing a televised version of the story for a 21st century audience? This distinction is important, and this is where they go on to their argument that, well, the Tolkien estate signed off on these things, therefore it's okay for us to inject wokeness in political statements. The difference here is that we have Tolkien on the record saying how he was against certain things being adapted in earlier versions. And the Tolkien estate is not Tolkien. It's just the guardian of his work. Now, I might and I am not a 100% purist. I am definitely on the purist fence. I can't speak for Tolkien just as much as I don't think the Tolkien estate can speak for Tolkien, but the Tolkien estate has the legal right to make these sort of judgment calls. So we have to let that fly, however that's going to fly. I don't like it, but it is what it is. Um, Past adaptations, including Tolkien's, have changed the source material. Mm, maybe. I wouldn't say Tolkien's own stuff. He did, however, and this is the reference material that they use. Um, and we're skipping the Peter Jackson stuff because we talked about that in a previous episode. It says even Tolkien understood how adaptation worked in a famous letter written in 1958, which commented on the first attempt to adapt The Lord of the Rings to a film format. Tolkien provided copious feedback, most of which was negative, about his concern for the changes being made in the script. He didn't love the reckless changes to his world and had a lot of issues where adaptations exercised unnecessary or inaccurate creative license, all of which I think are being done and taken with the Rings of Power. In the letter, he suggests that either the Ents or the Battle of Helm's Deep should be cut entirely from the story, or should be entirely cut from the story, as in taken out entirely. To use his own words, actually, I myself should be inclined to cut it right out if it cannot be made more coherent and a more significant part of the story. Note, though, that he's saying if we can't figure out a way to make it work in a film format, I am in favor of just cutting it so that we don't have this thing that's not making sense for the film version. Again, cutting something, not adding to. He didn't have a problem cutting out. He had a problem with, going up again, reckless changes and adaptations that exercised unnecessary or inaccurate creative license. Tolkien wasn't adaptation happy. He zealously guarded his works against any attempted changes. The impossible need for purity is the next section of this article. And they talk about purists are often going to criticize with the use of free-wielding knowledge regardless of the actual question at hand, and that's wrong. If you watch an adaptation, give it real thought, dig into the background of various decisions, and then decide that you thoroughly dislike it, that's okay. You shouldn't judge a book by its cover. I agree with that in theory. However, we've already seen from the showrunner's perspective that they don't have a lot of respect for the source material because they're willing to inject political correctness into it and inject this woke culture, these gender swapped, gender confused characters. We got to have people of color because Tolkien didn't have enough people of color in his North Anglo-Saxon mythology. Someone brought up a good example. I just had an interview the other day, which is coming out on another channel, which we'll be talking about in Discord when it comes out. We were discussing the Northman film and how the Northman film is a Viking tale. It's about the North. It's about the Scandinavian mythology, that Norwegian Viking mythology. Guess what? Not a single person of color in that film. Is it a racist film? No. Am I sitting here going white power about that film? No. But I am respecting that, much like you can't have a white person in a Black Panther role, you shouldn't be worried about injecting color into your characters who are from an Anglo-Saxon mythology and world, and that's definitely what's been going on with the Rings of Power. So I can say, from my perspective, that from a slightly purist standpoint, which has nothing to do with racism, it has, and by the way, on the record, I have stated in multiple previous videos that I do not care about the color of an actor when it comes to them portraying the role. I do not think it matters what color the actors and actresses are who are playing these roles. But I will admit that injecting color for the sake of just modernizing things doesn't respect the source material. And that absolutely is, going back up to here, um, unnecessary and inaccurate creative license. Absolutely. This is an Anglo-Saxon, mythology at play here. It was written that way on purpose. I digress. Um, there's also this idea that there's the unique issue with being a Middle Earth purist is that there are different versions of the text, and which version of the text are you going to go with? I always go with the published versions of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. The versions that I read when I read The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings books, those are the versions that I read, the most current versions, the most current versions. I don't worry about all of the history of Middle Earth and all of this other stuff because, oh, he contradicted this, that, or the other in this book that was published 60 years after his death. And there's these 17 other novels that Christopher Tolkien produced, and all these different things here contradict what was published in The Hobbit, and they contradict what was published in the thing. And Tolkien said this in a letter somewhere, and therefore the letter means more than the books, and therefore we should take the letter into account, and that it means that he was actually saying this when he wrote this in the Lord. Fuck that. When you've written something and you published it and it's out there, there can be, revisions made to that, but those revisions were done 50 years ago, or whatever. Like we've had those versions of published works for a long time. And I can say, yes, those are the last. The moment Tolkien died, the moment J.R.R. Tolkien passed away, anything that he left unfinished, whether it was stuff that he intended to get to or not later on down the road, that's the end. That's it. He's gone. Christopher Tolkien can do what he wants, and he's doing that in the spirit of his father, but he is not his father. And he might be able to take notes and say, well, I think my father said this, but the reality is that the moment Tolkien died, whatever he had written and published up to that point became the de facto definitive versions. And not, they talk about another living text in the eyes of its author. Well, the author died. Then anything after that doesn't matter because it was whatever was in the published world up until that point. End of story. At least that's my opinion. So, interesting article. I don't agree with large swaths of it. I don't think there's anything wrong with being a purist when it comes to the source material. I think it's a good thing to respect the source material. I think it's okay to take away from, to cut, even to meld. One of the things I loved about what Peter Jackson did with his films was the melding of different things, where we've got like the text that Faramir says over Éowyn when she's being healed in the houses of the kings later on at the end of Return of the King, and that speech, gets put in the mouth of Wormtongue in the Two Towers film with Peter Jackson's, and it changes the meaning of that text entirely. And I was absolutely okay with stuff like that because you're still drawing from the same source material, and you're not adding to, you're just kind of switching things around to give it a slightly different meaning and a slightly different take to adapt it for the medium. And I was okay with that. I'm okay with cutting Tom Bombadil and other things of that nature. But I do have issue, like I said, when you just start adding things for the sake of whatever. You need a romance, so you got to add romantic characters in there, whatever. Love to hear your thoughts. Obviously, I'm going to be continuing to rant about the Rings of Power as we get closer to the show. This rant series also inspired me to start the Mondays in Middle Earth show series, which is live every Monday at 11 a.m. Central Time. We're already up to like I think 5 or 6 episodes now. I got an interview with Liam from Liam's Lyceum coming out next week. If you want to check that out. We are doing a read through of The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and the Silmarillion leading up to the Rings of Power so that we can continue to poke, prod, and pick at the inconsistencies we see. And we'll analyze other Tolkien experts as they make these ridiculous claims about certain things like beards didn't have dwarves, bearded women didn't have dwarves, dwarven women didn't have beards, which I cry bullshit on because I am a dwarven princess, and I clearly have a beard. And as we know from The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, beards are normal on dwarves. The Hobbit mentions them more than 30 times. Uh, Dwarves have beards, and we see in the Lord of the Rings appendices that dwarven women are indistinguishable from men in dress and appearance. Therefore, I am a dwarven princess, so I don't know what you're talking about. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you get updates like that. Don't forget to join our Discord. Links are down below. It'd be great if you threw a super thanks at this video. You could also join as a member. I stream almost every single day if you want to check those out. We play games, we do videos on movies, books, TV shows, other things. And of course, there's always the Patreon for that world map behind me. It's the world of the Weave of the Void, where my brother, my wife, and I are creating the world. It's a 5th edition tabletop setting. It's those books are out in June. It's a point and click adventure game like King's Quest. Demo's out now. You can download that at the Patreon page, and it's a book series like Dragonlance, which you can access via the Patreon, published twice a month. Patreon.com/Wandering Hermits. All the links are down there. See you in the next episode. Don't get too hyped about Rings of Power, everybody. We got a lot more to talk about, so see you in the next episode. Peace.